I played an unwitting important role in a story published by ProPublica called The Militia and the Mole. Let's get into it here. Chris Graham, Augusta Free Press. An anonymous email sent to me 2 years ago offered an ominous warning that a heavily armed woman claiming to be my neighbor had threatened me at a right-wing militia meeting. Now, I would learn more details about this and learn a lot more than I cared to learn. At that time, I've learned a lot more since, obviously. Turns out there was a lot more to the story. Um, First, the guy who sent me the email turned out to be the commander of a far-right Utah militia group. And also, this militia commander group leader was also a double agent. Okay, I wish I was making this up. I'm not that creative, and I'm a pretty creative person. This double agent guy had infiltrated the militia group, um, with his goal being to expose the connections of the militia movement to local police departments, sheriff's offices, state police, and federal law enforcement across the country. I got it. I was caught up in this somehow, right? This is amazing to me. I learned all of this about the anonymous guy who had emailed me 2 years ago, just a couple days ago, when a reporter for a nonprofit whistleblower news site reached out to me about the article published by ProPublica, written by Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter Joshua Kaplan, titled "The Militia and the Mole." I'll link to it here on Facebook, excuse me, on YouTube. Um, The reporter for the whistleblower site wanted to know if I was the local reporter describing Kaplan's story, because my name wasn't put in, neither was the name of Augusta Free Press, as being the focus of a woman on a Zoom seminar put on by the leader of an AP3 militia group who had brought up an issue in her Virginia hometown, population 23,000. That's Waynesboro. That's us. Um, the description from Kaplan continued: the town's vice mayor, a proud election denier, was under fire for a homophobic remark. That references Jim Wood, the Waynesboro vice mayor, still the vice mayor of Waynesboro, who 6 weeks before the online threat was directed at me, had used a homophobic slur in a podcast directed at Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. I'm the reporter who broke that story and another reporting on homophobic comments that Wood had made on another podcast about the hammer attack on the husband of House Speaker Emeritus Nancy Pelosi, reporting that led to calls from fellow city council members from a number of city residents that would step down, right, resign his seat. So back to Kaplan's reporting. Um, the neighbor, believed a local reporter covering the controversy was leading a secret far left plot. You saw me roll my eyes there, hopefully. What's more, the reporter happened to be her neighbor. To intimidate her, she said he'd been leaving dead animals on her lawn. I've dealt with this before. Okay. I think I have a score to settle with this guy. The woman went on to say, according to Kaplan's telling, they're getting down to the deep state local level and it's got to be stopped. After the call, the mole, who now goes by the name John Williams, I have no idea what his real name is, or what was. He reached out to the woman who not only lives in Waynesboro, but is indeed a neighbor of mine. I would find out later. He wanted to talk her down. When she resisted, per Kaplan's reporting, Williams, who had wrestled with what to do in these kind of situations before, when he had learned that the militia had developed red list of journalists, he realized he faced a choice: do nothing or risk his cover being blown. He finally came to the same conclusion he had last time he'd feared journalists were in jeopardy on March 31st, 2022, or 2023, excuse me. He sent an anonymous warning. That anonymous warning went to me. He sent the anonymous warning to me. So that's how I come into this. I faced a choice too. Um, when I got the email from the guy who's now known as John Williams, I quickly verified that the screen name that he had sent me and that he said had been used in the discussion matched the names of a couple at an address 2 houses up from mine. I've never met these folks. I'm not sh I mean, I think I've seen the husband in the front yard a couple of times. But they're pretty reclusive, I guess. I don't know. We only know them as the people who have the oversized Trump sign in their front yard with Christmas lights on it. Um, Not the kind of people I would, just go out of my way to like take cookies to or anything. I then made another connection that the screen name also matched the name of a person who had commented 4 times on discussion threads on the AFP website. on stories reporting on Wood, including a response to another letter writer who cast Wood's slur of Buttigieg as being hate speech by commenting that, quote, hate must be a relative term because the only hate being spewed is being directed at Jim and this media outlet. So there you go. The reason for the hate is over the Jim Wood reporting. The anonymous emailer informed me she thinks you sent fake bombs to her house and placed dead animal carcasses in her yard. She said she's looking to settle a score with you. She said she's going to do midnight walkabouts to gather intel on you. I mean, it'd be easy to do. She's two houses up the street. She's setting up a camera system on her property in an attempt to get video of you doing the things she thinks you're doing. Because she is a member of a right-wing militia group and is heavily armed, I wanted to let you know. She seemed to me to be suffering from mental health issues. Based on my past interactions with her, I believe her to be severely mentally ill and I believe her to be dangerous. So I get this the night of March 31st, 2023, and yeah, it rocked a little bit. um, the and in part because I mean the with I knew nothing of what had been said when it had been said, but it felt like the fact that this guy was reaching out to me, it felt like he maybe thought it was a fresh threat, like maybe it just happened, right? I debated on what to do. I called the police, but I also thought about reporting on this in Augusta Free Press because I assumed that it was possible that I'd be inviting the heavily armed person to attack me. But I also thought if I out her before she does anything, at the least the cops in the world will know who did it. I mean, you hate to think in those terms, but that's how you gotta, I mean, that's how I was thinking. And to that point, for the next few months, every time I walked out of my house to go mow my grass, to shoot hoops in the backyard, it was in the back of my mind. It wasn't actually in the back of my mind. It was in the front of my mind. You just don't know. If a clear shot, maybe something happens. Maybe my head gets blown off. I'm not. I hope I'm not exaggerating or over dramatizing things. That's how I felt. So the only thing I knew, because I didn't think the police and were going to do anything, and they ended up not. The thing I knew to do to protect myself was to write a story, hit publish, and hope for the best. I mean, at the least, again, maybe it will provide some insulation, some cover. So that was the fallout for me. The fallout from that, though, was also on the other side of the continent because the next morning, so I wrote this story on March 31st, 2023. The next morning, April 1st, 2023, per Kaplan's reporting, I've just learned this in the last couple of days, um, that the man we now know by the name John Williams decided after seeing my story in AFP. So he obviously, I mean, I didn't send him a thing and say, hey, here you go, I'm writing this story because had no idea who this guy was. But he monitored and he saw the story. He decided his cover had been blown. He pulled a go bag from his closet and fled. He had no time to clean the dishes. This is from Kaplan's report. He had no time to clean the dishes that had accumulated in his apartment. He did not know if armed men were out looking for him. He did not know if he would ever feel safe to return. He parked his car for the night in the foothills overlooking Salt Lake City. Um, the go bag contained, we learned from Kaplan's story, three pairs of socks, a few $100s cash, makeshift disguises and lockpicking gear, medical supplies, vitamins and high energy gels, and thumb drives that each held more than 100 gigabytes of encrypted documents, which he would quickly distribute if he were about to be arrested or killed. In the daylight, he dropped an envelope with no return address in a U.S. Postal Service mailbox. He loaded it with a flash drive and a gold Oath Keeper's medallion. It was addressed to Kaplan. So he went on the run and decided to share everything he knew. He spent a few weeks in the desert, put the flash drive containing his life's work in the mail. The rest of the story about this guy was he had infiltrated these groups and had worked his way up into a position of being the leader of one of these groups in a relatively short period of time, like a couple, 2 or 3 years, right? And he, somehow was able to live this double life, not with police backing, not with police even knowing what he was doing. He was doing this independently. I can't imagine. So he threw his phone in a river, flushed documents down the toilet, switched apartments when he returned to civilization. At first, he spent every night by the door ready for an attack. If anyone found him and ambushed him, it would happen after dark, he figured. No one ever came, and he began to question if he needed to flee at all. The insomnia of his undercover years finally abated. He began to sketch out the rest of his life. So he's out. The sort of the rest of the story for him, and I read the ProPublica article. It's so well done. I mean, it has to be. It was a story that took 2 years to write. Um, he's this guy John Williams is not giving up on the effort to expose militia groups. I don't know how he's doing it. The story kind of leaves that hazy, I think. I mean, I've read it a few times now. It's not like this guy could ever infiltrate a group again, but it seems like maybe he's trying to work with other people who can do that. His whole goal, he says, is to basically have these militia group members all thinking that one of them could be a mole. And I'm sure that was one of the reasons he cooperated and went public with his story. So he's out. What about me? Uh, you know, what's interesting is uh this is still, I mean, this is still fresh. There's he had so much information in that the Kaplan and other journalists are still sorting through everything he gave them. There's a lot to what they've been able to report, and I'm told there's a lot more coming. Um, the part of interest to me, for probably obvious reasons, involves the surveillance and journalists. Among the things we've learned, and I'm going to be keeping tabs on this, what else is revealed from his treasure chest of information. But the red list I talked about of journalists who are on the radar of militia groups that include the names, addresses, photos of homes and vehicles, personal information about their family members, where they live and work, and what cars they drive. I mean, this is a surveillance operation there, and I don't know that you gather this information for any other reason other than to use it for nefarious intent. Um, so that said, it's one thing when it's somebody anonymous who has to look up your address on GIS and drive to your neighborhood and risk sticking out like a sore thumb when they're trying to amateur surveil you. This person who threatened me still lives 2 doors up the street from me. I've got to drive by their house uh, almost every time I leave my neighborhood. They still have the oversized Trump sign with the Christmas lights on it in their front yard. It's been 2 years. I had put the minute by minute fear of having my head blown off when I'm outside behind me. The publication of this story has kind of opened that wound back up. It's definitely done it for my wife. She had a couple of sleepless nights since this story in ProPublica was published. It's just one of those things. You can't overcome it. This is all because I reported on vile comments made by this Jim Wood guy. Um, and doing so to make clear that maybe this kind of person shouldn't be representing uh, this city on city council. Um, and this guy, not surprisingly, he was a January 6th guy. He's an election denier. I mean, he kind of things he says. Not surprising in that respect, but people on his side think the problem isn't his hate speech. They think the problem is the person reporting on the hate speech. I'm not packing a go bag if you need to know where my head is on this.